Next on my list of games I've found in development on Twitter and then follow until they release, we have Thymesia, a Bloodborne-inspired adventure with some interesting combat mechanics that had my attention at first glance. I waited and watched through all the posts and updates for probably well over a year until there was a demo released on May 2nd of this year. I played it and it was pretty rough. I haven't had the chance to play Bloodborne as of this video, but Thymesia's combat was very reminiscent of that style. Very aggressive and focused on quick dodges and strikes. There's this parry mechanic that does exactly what you'd expect it to do, it just negates damage and keeps you in the enemy's face if you can land it. But the timing on this ability was way too strict. It felt like it required frame-perfect execution and sometimes didn't feel fair at all. And then there's this feather counter, so enemies will flash green to indicate these unblockable lethal attacks are coming. Very similar to perilous attacks from Sekiro, but instead of jumping over them or stomping on thrusts, this feather is a projectile. Yeah, a projectile being used to counter close-range attacks. It was easily the most frustrating thing about the demo. It was so unreliable to use consistently. This first mini-boss swordsman destroyed me a countless number of times.
What a
and I kept trying to use the feather at different moments in the attack's animation, but nothing seemed to work. And when it did randomly, I had no idea why. So when I finally did get past him or the other enemies that use these kinds of moves, it didn't feel earned at all. It also wasn't just me feeling mixed. The reception and reviews under the demo on Steam reflected this as well. I left this demo pretty dead set on not making a video for Thymesia anymore. But then, on August 5th, a second demo was released as part of the Steam Night Market Festival. This updated build claimed to have fixed and tweaked several things that had left most players with a bitter taste in their mouth. And as a baseline, yeah, they fixed it. Demo 2 lets the player go through the same areas and fights, but just with the rebalanced mechanics, and it's a world of difference. The basic parry is more reliable and makes encounters more comfortable. Everything just feels a bit more reliable overall, but that's really it. It's crazy how just a few tweaks to values can impact how a game feels so drastically. The only thing I'm still not 100% sold on is the feather counter. I hit it more in Demo 2, that's for certain, but I still didn't feel like I could consistently hit it. But that's it for the demos and previews. And hey, the second demo did a lot to get me back on the train, but a good Souls game needs more than what this demo has shown. Let's go ahead and dive into Thymesia. This is the Kingdom of Hermes, but things have gotten a little terrible here for lack of a better description. Not long after a shortage of the citizens' newest copium, alchemy, the whole city kind of started going crazy. Thus, we have ourselves a mass outbreak of cheap alchemy that's taken over the entire kingdom, turning everyone and everything into mutated abominations with no wits left of them. So now, it's up to this mysterious man Corvus to figure out what's going on, but unfortunately for him, his memory isn't quite what it used to be. So with the help of this young girl Esme, he dives deep into his fractured memories to uncover the truth about himself and hopefully the answer to stopping the plague. From here you'll take Corvus through 4 locations, fighting enemies, exploring for resources, and challenging the bosses as they come. I hate to make the reduction so early on in the video, but it is the Souls formula that we all know and love. Interestingly, instead of a seamless world, Thymesia takes the Demon Souls approach to structure. Each of Corvus's memories are levels, essentially. The first mission of every level will be your typical romp to get to the end and generally get familiar with the level's layout. And after you overcome that first mission, the next level will become available. But sub-missions for the level you just completed will also be unlocked. So you get the choice to either explore a rearranged version of the previous level with a different goal, like destroy these poisonous tumors, find the secret intel, or kill an optional boss, or you can go ahead and proceed to the next main level. I found this to be really refreshing for a Souls game. The main levels usually took me 45 minutes to an hour to get through, but I really liked exploring these locations. Being careful to check every corner I could and find as many shortcuts as possible, mainly because that's the kind of player I am, but also because knowledge of these levels' layouts comes in handy when going back through for submissions. These levels are superbly designed. The first and third levels reflected a lot of design principles from Dark Souls 1 specifically. Sea of Trees is a tree village meets mutated circus aesthetic where navigation was facilitated by traversing rickety bridges and ladders. And Hermes' fortress not only looks like Boletaria, but it has its fair share of secret doors and vertical watchtowers. The royal garden is also really cool to go through with all of its greenhouses and libraries, but it's slightly less complexly woven as the other two. There aren't any special items to find in these levels that do anything for you in previous ones. The only pickups are the diary entries to piece together the story, soul deposit consumables, and the keys that pertain to the mission you're currently in. But I'm not complaining about this too much because Corvus wouldn't need many extra goodies with how stacked he already is. Corvus can quickly swish his saber with the right bumper, parry with the left bumper, and dodge with a short dash using the B button. That's where his basic abilities stop, with the rest of his arsenal becoming far more unique. As you go off and kill enemies and such, you gain the souls or runes or blood echoes or whatever the experience is called in this game to level up 3 attributes: the amount of health you have, the damage your saber does, and the damage your plague weapon does. Okay, so this is where things get fun. The Y button allows Corvus to attack with his Plague Claw. This Plague Claw serves 2 very important functions. The first one being that enemies essentially have 2 health bars. The white health bar is best taken down by the saber, and then the green bar underneath is best taken down by the claw. If the enemy is left alone for too long after damaging the white health bar, it will begin to recover over the green. So you have to make sure to remove the green from the health bar before retreating, otherwise your assault would have been for nothing. And the claw's second purpose is to acquire plague weapons. You're familiar with Kirby, right? Little Pink Puffball just released a really fun game. Anyway, you know how he can absorb the abilities of his enemies to use as he sees fit? Whether that be a blaster, control over a race of small aliens, or the power to destroy a planet with great hair? Yeah, Corvus can do that too with almost every single enemy and boss in Thymesia. It's not a full moveset, mind you, but he gets one powerful attack if he lands a charged Plague Claw strike. From the axes the beginning enemies wield, the scythes that the gardeners use, the bows of the archers, and even dual swords. There are so many plague weapons to try out. Using one of these weapons costs energy, but you regain this energy as you fight and defeat enemies, so I never found myself really running out. And even better than that are the shards. Enemies have a chance of dropping a shard for the weapon they wield, and I think they're more likely to drop one if they're killed by a charged Plague Claw strike, but don't quote me on that. If you can collect 3 of the same type of shard, you can permanently carry around that plague weapon. And if you continue to collect the same type of shard, you can upgrade your existing weapons further. This will make them hit harder, reduce their cooldowns, and eventually add new attacks. Like the spear starts off as this 3-hit poking move, but then turns into a wide-reaching sweep attack that's great for knocking groups down. You can take any boss's powers during the fights and use them against them, but once you defeat them, you'll gain their ability to add to your collection. And let me tell you, I'm so glad I took the time to beat mutated Odur before I continued past the first level, because his weapon was the best. You gain access to this ridiculously strong and long-reaching tendril strike. I used this thing throughout the entire game. No joke, it's almost unfair. And then we have talents. After every level up, you gain an ability point. These can be located in a skill tree with plenty of skills to fit your playstyle. Don't like the claw's initial slow single swipe? Neither did I, so I spec'd into these fast combo swipes that complements that charged one really well. But there's also other options. You can get yourself a second quick dodge, or you can get a second dodge that travels a greater distance at the cost of some hang time afterwards. And the best part is there's no pressure if you're not feeling the skill that you just unlocked. These talents are all basically just equipable skills that you can turn on and off at any beacon checkpoint, meaning that you're free to mix and match any playstyle you want at any time. Oh, and that's not even covering the options for lethal attacks. Well, so remember how I was telling you about the feather counter and how I still don't get it after even the second demo? Yeah, I still didn't use it a single time in the final game. But that's mostly because I opted in for a physical wing swipe that replaces that projectile. It worked more reliably for sure, but I still had trouble on the timing. That was until I found the air step skill that allows me to hike off of any lethal attack. And then from there, I bought another skill that lets me come down with my Plague Claw for massive damage to the green bar. Oh man, I felt right at home when I got this. It activates by dodging into the enemy just like the Makiri counter, and it was so useful when I could pull it off. Because yeah, the actual counter was cool when it worked, but the timing was still weird, and it often knocked them away from me after I connected with it, so I had to dash to them to get a follow-up. The game later explains that you're supposed to hit the counter right as the attack is about to connect with Corvus, but it still felt inconsistent to me. Especially since a lot of these attacks were projectiles, and when I see the green flash and hear that sound cue, my first instinct is to get ready for the counter. That is unless I get surprised by a long-range attack that's kinda difficult to counter. It's just one of those things that I think all action games should have. If an attack needs to be countered in a certain way, that's great. But if the action actually requires me to use another tactic, that's fine too. I just think the reaction should have its own color. That kind of thing just goes a long way in making the battlefield more readable. There are already ultimate attacks in the game and the bosses will flash red when they're preparing them, so that's a good start, but I think projectiles needed something unique too. Realistically though, all things considered, fights are easy to keep up with if you use your Souls game fundamentals wisely. Single out enemies when you can, get the jump on the weaker enemies, use ranged attacks to draw attention, and being sure to check behind corners so you don't get ambushed. I think things are at their worst on the few occasions the camera flies into objects and obscures my view of the battlefield. It only happened a few times though, so it's not a huge deal. But other than that, battling is a lot of fun. It's just about the same speed as Sekiro, I want to say, which is exhilarating. The parry mechanic even tears down the white health bar, and that led me to steamrolling some boss fights, which just scratched that itch for me, let me tell ya. Experimenting with the different talents is just so much fun too, eventually unlocking the ability to equip 2 permanent plague weapons, so I could run around with 3 plague weapons and become a madman. But then that brings me to another little issue I have. Super armor is a bit odd in this game. So plague weapons give Corvus super armor, which ensures he can't be knocked out of the attack once it starts. But he still takes the same amount of damage, and he can't cancel out of the animation. For the smaller enemies that stagger after these hits, that's a no-brainer. Go to town with those plague weapons. Put those fools in the dirt. But bosses and mini-bosses, they're different. They don't stagger from plague weapons easily, if ever. That's why for bosses, pretty early on, I stopped trying to get ahead in the fights by using them. Because the animations take so long, even after waiting until the right moment, there was a good chance I was going to be open to a nasty hit afterwards. And that just ate into my little customizable Estus Flask reserve, and I didn't really like that. It became a better strategy to just treat every boss like a Sekiro boss. Learn the movesets to parry them down, watch for the lethal attacks to counter them, and then move in with the claw combo to whittle down the green bar. Then, rinse and repeat. It's why it became so much more fun after getting the far more reliable dash counter, because then I had more safe opportunities to really hurt the bosses consistently. But yeah, that's pretty much it, I think. I completed every memory and every subquest for each memory. All of that took me about 5 hours of continuous game time, but including deaths and a little more exploration than I probably needed to do, it put my final playtime at about 8 hours. I would give Thymesia a good grade overall. It takes a minute for the timing of the parry and counter to stick with you, and it definitely gets better after you acquire some talents. Customizing Corvus to play the way you want him to does a lot for how the game feels. It really did surprise me just how good all of the abilities complement each other when exploring the levels. And even some boss fights. My favorites were Mutated Odor for how he forced me to be cool under pressure. You can't back away to heal because his tendrils reach out so far, so you have to find out which moves are safe to act under. And Erd for how fast she is. She doesn't let you heal easily either, but because she's so fast. And again, she was the most fun to continuously dunk on. If you're curious about Thymesia or you're in the market for a short little Souls-like, I would say give it a shot. It goes for $25, which is appropriately priced, I would say. There are multiple endings to get and plenty of achievements to sink your teeth into if that's your thing. I think I accidentally got one of the bad endings, so whoops, I guess. Very happy to have played this one. Definitely one of my new favorites. But anyway, I appreciate you for watching. So thanks for stopping by and have a great day.